You can pick that hymnal back up if you would. Turn to the front of the hymnal for the second week in a row. Instead of looking at Luther's small catechism, let's turn to page 134. This is the Athanasian Creed, and it is traditional on Trinity Sunday that worshipers use as the creed, the Athanasian Creed. Now, we're not going to do this today, Pastor Peter. You just and the rest of you, you can take relief. But take a look at the length of this baby. It goes on for 2 pages. There's a lot said there. But the celebration of Trinity Sunday is the only church celebration centered around a church doctrine. And today's sermon will not be about some obscure teaching. Today's sermon will be about the God, the almighty, all-wise, all-powerful, all-loving God, who demonstrates that love for us in so many beautiful ways. But just to kind of whet your appetite for what we believe and teach and confess as Christians, take a look at that third paragraph. It starts, "And the Catholic faith is this." And it goes on, that we worship one God in 3 persons, and 3 persons in one God, neither confusing the persons nor dividing the substance. And then if you would skip to the end of the first page, not the last 2 lines, but the paragraph above it that begins, "And in this Trinity, none is before or after another, none is greater or less than another." But it goes on, "But the whole 3 persons are co-eternal together and co-equal, so that in all things, as aforesaid, the unity in Trinity and the Trinity in unity is to be worshipped." And then for much of that second page, it talks about Jesus, about how He was the Son of God, that He took on the manhood, the top of the second paragraph there, the second column, on the right-hand column. See how it says, "One not by conversion of the Godhead into flesh, but by taking the manhood into Godhead." Okay. All right. Enough words. When did that happen? It happened at Christmas. God became one of us in the baby Jesus. And then we go through the life of Christ, His teachings, the many parables by which He taught the kingdom of heaven, what it means to us, and the miracles that demonstrated that the power of God was at work in Him and that He is God. And then by His crucifixion, God died on that cross for the sins of the world. And yet on the 3rd day, God came back alive again in victory. And that, in a nutshell, is what Jesus is telling Nicodemus in that great gospel in a nutshell, John 3:16. We'll get there, but first I want to talk a little bit about the nature of God. Now, when we think about somebody we know, we pretty much know them by their actions, don't we? And in fact, if we really know and love someone and we see them acting differently, don't we say, "What's wrong? That's not like you"? Maybe there's some people that just they always act that way. You know, they're the kind of people that brighten up a room by leaving it. And we expect that from them. But others, you just, what's wrong? We recognize that. And so it is with God. God is a God of love. In fact, John, the gospel writer who records John 3:16, of course, also wrote 1 John and 2nd and 3rd John and received the revelation to John. But it's in 1 John chapter 4 that he says, God is love. He says, let us love one another, for love is of God, and anyone who loves is born of God and knows God. And the one who does not love does not know God, for God is love. And a little bit later in that same chapter, he says this, we love because he first loved us. And that's kind of where we're going. We're going to start by talking about this love of God. We're going to start back in the pages of Deuteronomy. God came to the people of Israel and God chose them. And this is the Hebrew Creed. Now, our president spoke Arabic to the Muslim world, but if he were really trying to capture the attention of the Jewish world, he would use these words from Deuteronomy chapter 6. He would begin his speech saying, Shema Israel, Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. This is the Hebrew Creed, that God is one. And this God is not just a powerful, mighty, wise God, but He is a loving God. And the people of Israel understood that God chose them. It's not here in chapter 6, but next door. If you had the whole thing like I do, you could look. But chapter 7, verse 7 says, it was not because you were more numerous than any other people that the Lord set His heart on you and chose you, for you were the fewest of all peoples. It was because the Lord loved you and kept His oath that He swore to your ancestors, and so on. God so loved His people. This is gospel in the Old Testament. Pure gospel in the Old Testament. And it is that kind of love that God has for His people. God chose us. God created us. We talk about God the Father as the one who creates life, the one who sustains life. We talk in the Lutheran, in his small catechism, makes it handy. At least the English translation I first learned had the 3 P's, you know. He provides for us, He protects us from all danger, and preserves us with all of our senses and so on. I think about the events of this week, that Air France disaster, that plane that was lost. And I think Pastor Peter mentioned that he's going to make reference to that in today's prayers. People depend on planes and the people who operate them to be able to get them from point A to point B. And those who fly those planes depend on the weather to cooperate and the machinery that they're using to cooperate. That's how it's supposed to work. But on this side of heaven, it doesn't always work that way. And bad things happen. And who do we blame? We too often end up blaming God, that He didn't protect, He didn't provide for, He didn't preserve in this case. When that is another example where we could certainly, and we will pray and say, God, this isn't like you. And indeed, it is not like God.